Hello, this is Robert Estrin at livingpianos.com, and I've had this question from so many viewers, I thought it was time to make a video on it, which is, can you soundproof your room? Or how do you soundproof your studio? This is a really tough subject, and right now we're in the process of building a new studio, and we're doing some soundproofing, so it's very, very much on my consciousness. So, can you soundproof a room? The simple answer is no. You can't, not easily. Well, can you? Well, yes, if cost is no object, there's no limitations whatsoever in what you're going to spend, you can. I remember years and years ago visiting a recording studio that was pretty much soundproof. And I asked the owner of the studio, how do you soundproof a room? He says, well, the easiest way is to build a room out of cinder blocks and fill the cinder blocks with sand. Well, that is one way that you could soundproof a room, but you probably don't want to do that. Now, why would that work? Well, the sound can't really overcome the mass. Although, the thing to keep in mind is even if you were to do that, you still might not have a soundproof room, because anywhere that air can go through, the sound will go through. Not only that, but if you soundproof the walls, but you haven't done anything with the floor or the ceiling, it's going to go wherever the path of least resistance is. So how can you possibly actually soundproof a room? Well, the way recording studios do it is generally with a principle of building a room within a room. And dead air is a great way of isolating sound. For example, if you build a wall and you put drywall on this side and drywall on the other side, and you got the studs in between, you might think, well, that should soundproof, shouldn't it? Well, if you've ever been in a house, you know it doesn't. You can hear people clearly in the other room. And you might wonder why and how. Think about this for a minute. Think about a drum that has a head on the top, a head on the bottom. And you beat the top head, it vibrates, the bottom head sympathetically vibrates, so the sound that you're producing on the top goes right through the bottom. It's exactly the same with a stud wall with drywall. This drywall vibrates, the stud vibrates, and then the other piece of drywall on the other side vibrates, passing the sound right through. Now, there are ways you can alleviate some of that. There is a technology called resilient channel. These are metal strips that, if the studs are going vertically, the metal strips are then screwed in horizontally. And so there's a slight gap between the drywall and the wooden studs. And the studs are then screwed into the resilient metal channel. And so the sound does not transfer to the studs, and therefore much less sound it goes through the wall, particularly if you use resilient channel on both sides of a wall and then stuff it with heavy insulation. Of course, there is no substitute for a complete floating room, a total room within a room, where you build an entire box essentially and then just have like points at which this room on top of the other room sits on the floor. And so it's not just flush with the floor, but maybe just on the corners you have 4 points that are as small as possible going to the floor. Because even a cement floor will certainly alleviate any high frequencies from passing through, but low frequencies, if they have enough energy, like at a bass guitar or a kick drum, can actually excite the floor and the floor on this side, and you have a wall here, and that whole concrete can actually vibrate at a low frequency and pass some of that sound energy to adjacent rooms. So soundproofing is not an easy process. If you're looking to soundproof, the easiest thing is to find a space that lends itself already to soundproofing. For example, if you have a house with an addition, you essentially have a structure that is completely separate from the original structure, a separate foundation, separate walls, all the rest of it. If it's built with a slight space between the two walls, if you build a second wall with dead air between them, you're on your way to having a true floating wall. And you may, depending on how far you want to go, There's no limit to how far you can go with soundproofing, but sadly, there are no easy ways to soundproof. Some people think, why don't I just put those foam, like it looks almost like egg cartons on the wall? Won't that soundproof? Well, no, actually, that doesn't soundproof at all. That's just to avoid reflected sound. It makes it absorb the reflected sound. Now it will make the room quieter, so less sound energy will transfer from room to room. And this is something you can do to help not soundproof, but to prevent some of the sound energy from passing from one room to the next, simply by having a room that is acoustically dead with thick carpeting and materials, thick drapes on the walls. You could acoustical tiles on the ceiling. Now this might not be a fun room to play in because it's acoustically dead and it's not very satisfying, but much less sound energy is present in the room. Therefore, less is going to be transferred to other rooms in the structure. Well, I hope this has helped you, and I hope it hasn't depressed you too much because some of the options are so incredibly expensive, but you can always improve your situation and hopefully be able to play your music in your home or studio without bothering other people. Thanks again for joining me, Robert Estrin here at livingpianos.com.